All right, guys, here we are doing our first little screencast. We're going to be talking about photosynthesis. All right, so you guys should have probably already gone through this, so I'm going to go through it pretty quickly and just focus on the big stuff that you need to know. All right, I don't want you guys getting lost in the weeds here. Um, all right, so the main problem I've noticed based on questions that we've had is that people are kind of forgetting that photosynthesis is a process. Okay, it's not a place. The way I think about photosynthesis is like a factory. Um, a chloroplast is kind of like a factory for making glucose. So what we're learning about is how that factory kind of operates, how that machinery runs. All right. So let's go through this real quick. You know all this. I don't think we really need to talk about that. All right, so let's talk about this. A chloroplast. This is a very, very tiny, tiny, tiny organelle that is inside of a leaf. So if we were to look at a plant, then we zoom into a leaf, then we zoom into a cell inside the leaf, then we zoom in again to look at a chloroplast, which is an organelle inside of that cell. Then if we zoom in again, what we end up with is this little cross section here that's showing us the outside of a chloroplast and these little dudes, which are known as thylakoids. You got a stack of them, you put them together, that's known as a grana. All right. You don't really need to know that. What we're mostly concerned about is the thylakoid, and then this fluid out here, okay, is known as the stroma. So I think about a chloroplast like a gusher, because that's kind of what it looks like. Except instead of being filled with sugar slop, it's filled with stroma. All right. So remember, we're talking about actual physical things that exist in nature that we can observe. I know it seems I know it seems abstract, but it's not. All right. This is a little teeny, teeny, tiny object that you can look at under a microscope. All right. So most of this process is going to be happening either in the thylakoid membrane, which would be right here where my arrow is, or out here in the stroma. All right. We talked about that in class. So this is the big picture stuff. Light dependent is the photo part of photosynthesis. What's really nice about the word photosynthesis is it tells us that there are two different parts to this. There's a photo part and a synthesis part, which is really nice. Photo requires light, light dependent. The other one, synthesis part, synthesis means putting things together, okay? So the synthesis part is going to be where we actually start putting sugar together, that tasty, tasty glucose that we all love so much and that people keep buying all of the flour and all of the eggs and all of the butter to the point where I can't make breakfast because you guys love cookies so much. All right. So, big picture, this is what you really want to know. What is the purpose of the light-dependent reaction? We are capturing energy from the sun and we're storing it in ATP and NADPH. That's going to get used later, but this is the purpose. What is the goal? That's what you want to be thinking about. Where is it happening? It's happening in our thylakoid membrane. So what this picture is showing you down here is we're really, really, oops, let me go back. We're really zoomed in now. So if we go back here, let me go back here. So what that picture is showing you is here's our chloroplast. Now we're going to zoom in even more, and we're just going to be looking at a cross section of this little black line here. Okay, so keep that image in your head. Now we're going to zoom in. And what we're looking at is that little black line. This is basically that little black line. Now, all of this is crazy. This is showing you a lot more than you need to know. If we were in class, I have an amazing drawing of this that's simplified. I have it right here. The problem is everything is backwards for you, which makes me sad, very, very sad. All right. So anyway, this is the image we are dealing with. So really quick, what you need to know about the light dependent reaction. What's our goal? We're making ATP and we're making NADPH. So how is that happening? It's freaking amazing. It's so incredible. It makes me very happy. It's one of the coolest processes in all of biology. So what happens is light right here, you can see that where my cursor is, light smacks this whole protein situation here. This is your chlorophyll, all right? Light smacks this. What happens is that light basically takes an electron from water. Okay, it's so strong, what it does is it smacks into that water and the water basically explodes. All right, it explodes into a hydrogen and it explodes into an oxygen, and its electrons get blown out of it, and then they basically go through this whole thing, which is known as the electron transport chain, or ETC. Okay, so that electron basically gets bumped around through this whole pinball complex until it gets all the way up here where it gets smacked again with light, except this time that light energy helps put it together with this thing, an NADP plus, a hydrogen, all right, and that helps us make NADPH. So what's happening? First thing, light hits this whole protein situation that explodes water. This electron gets bounced all around, and then finally it meets up here with an NADP and a hydrogen, and basically your NADP plus, your hydrogen plus, they're both positively charged, okay? They repel each other, so then that electron comes in and makes them stick together like that, all right? So they get stuck together and you get NADPH. So if we go back here, how do we get ATP? Well, we get ATP because this hydrogen starts to build up in here, and like when we talked about things that have a similar charge, they hate being together, okay? They don't want to be close to each other. It's like how you're too similar to your parents and you can't stand being stuck in a house with them, all right? Hydrogen's the same way, all right? They're all stuck in here together, so what they want to do is they want to get out. So inside the thylakoid lumen here, they get blasted out of this, and this thing is so awesome. It kind of operates like a turbine, and this turbine gets spun by all these hydrogens flowing through it like this, and they're just shooting out and shooting out and shooting out, and that energy is what sticks a ADP with a P, and it makes our good old friend ATP. So this is known as a ATP synthase or a ATP channel. So I'll go through it all real quick again. Light splits water, the electron makes NADPH out of H and NADP plus. The hydrogen from our split water goes over here and basically turns a turbine, just like in a dam, and makes ATP. That's what you really need to know about the light dependent reaction. Focus on this slide, purpose, location, and summary. Those are the slides I really want you to focus on. All right, don't get lost in the weeds. We're not going to talk about that. All right. So this is a little bit much. This is preparing you for AP Bio. Just know that an electron carrier is just NADPH. It is grabbing two electrons, all right, and a hydrogen, and it's sticking them together. So that way it can use those electrons later to power stuff in the Calvin cycle. So here's our big overview of that reaction we just went through, okay? And light independent reaction, this is the same thing as the Calvin cycle. This is the one I've been getting a lot of questions on. This is also the one that you need to know the least about. This is what you need to know. What is its purpose? We're using the energy that we got from the sun, and we then stored it in ATP, and we stored it in NADPH. We're using that energy, okay, to stick a bunch of carbons together, and that's how we get sugar. So the light dependent reactions take place in the thylakoid membrane. This is taking place in the stroma. So this is the gusher part of our gusher. This is the fluid, all right? What do you need to know? This slide right here, purpose and location, all right? The summary of the Calvin cycle is that you basically are taking a bunch of enzymes powering them with ATP and NADPH, and they are taking carbon dioxide, sticking a whole bunch of carbon dioxides together, and that eventually makes a 3-sugar. Okay, it only has 3 sugars. If you look here, glucose has 6 sugars. So it makes this, or it doesn't have 3 sugars, it has 3 carbons, sorry. It basically makes a sugar that only has 3 carbons. And you take 2 of these guys, these 3 carbon sugars, stick them together, and you get a glucose. Details. This is just kind of a little preview of some stuff you might see in AP Bio. Don't worry about it. Here's the slide I ultimately want to talk about, is the big picture slide. So you do need to know this. Let's go. All right. So if you look, actually before we get into it, let's remember what we're looking at here. This whole picture here is showing you a chloroplast. All right. So we went leaf, we went cell, we went chloroplast, and now what this is showing you is basically a chloroplast cut in half. So this chloroplast that is cut in half, okay, this side right here is showing you a stack of thylakoids, all right, and all of this gray area out here is the fluid. That is all the stroma. So let's go through this whole process, the big picture, ultimately what I really want you to know. So this side over here is going to be the photo side of photosynthesis. Bam, that is the light-dependent reactions. This side over here is going to be the light-independent reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. Okay, so let's pop back over here to the light-dependent reactions. What's the first thing we need? Well, it's light. Okay, the other thing we need for the light-dependent reactions is water, H2O. So light hits H2O, it splits H2O apart, all right, and that makes NADPH, and it also makes ATP. Now, that water is made of H2O. The H's go here into NADPH, but what happens to those oxygens? Well, the oxygens get farted out as a waste product. Sorry to say it, guys, but the air we breathe, they're just plant farts. This is a waste product. The plant doesn't need that much oxygen. Okay, over here to the Calvin cycle. Now, what do we need for the Calvin cycle? What's our input? CO2. What else are our inputs? ATP and NADPH. So we're using that power stored in ATP, using that power stored in NADPH, and that gives us sugar. All right. So what's really cool about this whole process is ATP, it gets used up, that makes ADP, all right? And here's our little extra P floating around. Remember ADP, adenosine diphosphate. So there's only 2 phosphates here. Here's the other little guy. And they're gonna go back over here and get recycled. And our H's get split off of our NADP+. So now NADP+ has to go back here, back to our thylakoid, hook up with water, and start the whole process all over again. All right, so this is the big picture. This is what I want you to know. This is money. This is everything that you need to know about photosynthesis in one slide. All right, light reactions on the left, dark reactions, light independent reactions, or Calvin cycle on the right. You'll hear it called all of those things. What are our inputs for the light reactions? Light and water. What are our outputs? NADPH and ATP. What's another output? Oxygen. It's a waste product. Okay, so now let's go to the inputs of the Calvin cycle. You can see an input is ATP. You can see an input is NADPH. And you can see an input is CO2. What's our ultimate output hole? What's the goal of all of photosynthesis? It's to make sugar. Okay, that's an output of the Calvin cycle. Another output is ADP and NAD+. All right, guys. Hopefully that was helpful. See you next time.